Oh, is he? Awesome. We good? We're good. Good evening. Holy cow, that is really, really loud. Okay. There, I don't even have to use any like hand signals or anything where just the mic is that loud. So, okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for being here tonight and welcome to the Wenatchee School District. We've got a good, amazing cross section here of our community in one place. So we appreciate you all being here. We also have a dream team of pre-bond folks here that are going to help guide us through this evening. So I'm excited to get things started, but we have some folks in the room that we should probably recognize. Let's see, we've got Chief Crowns here, right? Okay, thank you for being here. We have Sheriff Morrison is in the house, so thank you for being here as well. We have Mayor Mike Poyer is in the house. I love it. Okay, thank you for being here, sir. We also have some school board members too. So we have Tucker Jackson's here. Thanks, Tucker, for being here. We appreciate that. And Miranda Skaliski is over here as well. And just a great gathering of folks from the community. Everyone, thank you all for being here tonight, because I know that if you're here, you're giving up something in your life to be here. So I appreciate that. And we'll try to stick to our timeline. I have a tendency to talk too much, but Phil is going to make sure that I'm not talking too much, and that's good. And then I'll do the same for him when he jumps up here. So my name is Corey Callahar, and I have the privilege and honor of being the superintendent of the Wenatchee School District, and will be your host for a little bit of tonight. And then I'm going to hand it over to Phil and our dream team. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the stage for us this evening, just as a quick welcome, which I'm kind of already doing right now. I'll do an introduction to the committee itself, and I have some information to share with you, and then do a little bit of the background and some of our overall outcomes for tonight. So you will have me for just a few moments up here. So as we get started here, just kind of an explanation of the evening. And one of the other things is we do have some folks that want to be part of the group and will participate in the group. But weren't able to make it tonight. So we have a few folks that are joining us on Zoom. So that's the reason why we're using the microphone. And the reason that Liz is going to have me kind of stay in this region, right? This is kind of where we need to stay. I have a tendency to wander. So, but we're going to try to stick to that. So why long-range facility planning? Well, long-range facility planning is always necessary. Doesn't matter the lay of the land or what's happening, you need to have a long-range facility plan. And we do not currently have a long-range facility plan. And so that's where our work is very important. The last bond that we successfully passed was in 2014. And that's the bond that brought you the new Washington Elementary and then a remodeled Lincoln Elementary as well. And as you know, we went out for a bond in 2018 that was not successful, and that was a revisioning of Wenatchee High School. Some of those needs that, well, actually, all of the needs that we wanted to address in 2018 are still represented in Wenatchee High School, except for maybe the capacity and the growth. That is something that we are looking at a little bit differently from 2018. But we have not done a ton of long-range planning since that time period. Under Dr. Gordon's leadership, we were looking at going out for another bond, having it be another revisit at Wenatchee High School, but then the pandemic hit. And so we have not continued with that planning. We've had some leadership changes since then, since the pandemic. We've also had some budget concerns that have kept us fairly busy since then. But the reality of our long-term planning and our long-range planning, even short-term, is we have some aging facilities, as you are probably aware of. And we have a great deal of need with regard to minor repair and a great deal of need with regard to some major repairs. So those are some things that we'll be talking about. And Phil's got an amazing amount of information and data to give to you tonight. Tonight is going to be a data dump for you. You're just like, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff coming at you, but it'll be good and it's important and it's relevant. We are at a situation also in the Wenatchee School District where we do not have funds in our capital projects fund as well to take care of some of these short-term needs as well as some of the long-term needs. So again, a great reason for us to be together and for us to talk about long-term planning. So, and as Brian Brocky, raise your hand. He is our director of M&O. As Brian shares with me all the time, like, Corey, Dude, we're one catastrophic event away from needing to dip into our fund balance to fix some things. So those are some great reasons as why we're all together. But we have set the stage for us to be successful in our long range planning. And the way that we have done that is we have completed a survey and study, or a study and survey of our entire district. And that's a comprehensive building assessment of each piece of the school district. So we started that in August of 2023 with our friends from Turner and Townsend Erie. And we have completed that project. And so the school board, the state, and all of you will have access to complete comprehensive look at our building assessments. And I think that's one thing you're going to be going over tonight, Phil. We have also met with the team about our cleaner energy bill standards that came out of the 2019's cleaner building bill. So we'll be talking a little bit, you'll get a little bit of that tonight. And then in our April meeting, you'll get more of that. We've also hired what I consider to be the best pre-bond consulting team in the state to help us with that work, right? Would you guys agree? Okay, I think they would agree. Okay. But as costs continue to rise in building and construction, we need your help to get us to that next phase. That's that place where we have a long range and a short range facility plan in front of us that we can access and use as a community, and one that our community can own and support as we eventually potentially take this out to an election ballot. Okay, so that's why you're all here, is we need your help and support for that. So we appreciate you being here for that. I will share with you a little bit of our budget realities. I don't know if anyone in the room has heard that we have some budget challenges, and there's been some things that we've been doing to propose to help us with those budget challenges and the complications. But I wanted to give you a snapshot of what that looks like. And to describe it without getting into the graphics in just a second is, we have been experiencing declining enrollment for the past 9 years, and I will show you that graphically. This is a graphic that we've shared many times in the last 4 months, but you can see here that back in 2000, yellow, did I do that? Okay. I'm not going to touch anything else, but you can see back here in 2015-16 where we were upwards of 7,655 students, and where we are trending now this year with 6,740 students. So we've seen a dramatic decline in the last few years. Phil has some numbers and some graphs that will also show what that looks like as well. And so you can see here in the pandemic, we lost close to 380 families, and that became our new normal. And that's kind of where we have experienced some declining enrollment from that point as well. Now, what happened during this time is also interesting, is we were infused with ESSER dollars for the district to survive the pandemic, right? And with those dollars, we did the best that we possibly could to help take care of our students and help them learn and grow during that time. And so we increased staffing during that time. So it kind of together, our enrollment decline has that same line, but you can see that our staffing has increased during that time. So we are out of alignment with enrollment and our staffing a little bit. So that gives you an idea of what it is that we're talking about and what we're dealing with. This year right now is the first year that we have done budget reductions since 2018-19 school year. So we are addressing the concerns, and we have reduced in our district this year $4.2 million. But we still have some work to do in aligning that staffing to enrollment. So I just wanted to give you that little bit of background if you didn't have that already. This is a graphic of our plan to address the budget concerns. And up top, we have our grade levels. So we have our elementary school. Our proposal is the closure of Columbia for a recoup of $2.8 million. Our middle schools had all of their schedules aligned and changed, and then there was some staffing reduction that came out of that work as well. So that's a $2 million mark. And then we have our high school schedule change and some staffing reduction as well, $671,000. The idea here is what we're experiencing in the enrollment decline is very heavy in our elementary schools. But as our second, third, and fourth graders get to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, our middle schools are going to be drastically smaller than they are right now. And then once those 6th, 7th, and 8th graders move up to 9, 10, and 11, then our high school is going to be experiencing some of that enrollment decline. And so we're trying to get the schedules aligned and changed so that we can be a little bit more nimble, so that we can respond to what enrollment is bringing in, because almost all of our funding comes from enrollment. And so we have to make sure that we're doing the right thing by our fiscal responsibility there. And then down below here, we have another $1 million in staffing reductions, and then a big chunk of dollars coming back from our materials, supplies, and operating costs, those MSOC dollars. And that equals that $8.9 million that we're shooting for. So I wanted to give you a little bit of the cliff notes as to what it is we are proposing for the budget reduction, because this conversation right here plays into our work as a facilities team and what we plan on in the future, because there's been some community concerns with this proposal. There's some trust issues in the district, and I think in the community, that we want to talk about, and we want to be open and transparent about that. And we also want to make sure that what we are doing is in line with enrollment decline. Because a lot of times you go out for capital projects or you go out for a bond, it's because you're growing and you have to, grow and build more. We're not necessarily in that situation, but we're in a situation where we have aging facilities that need to be fixed, and they need to be redesigned and redone, and we don't have the capacity to do that in our regular budget. So that's kind of where we fall, and I want to be upfront with the team on that. Yellow. Okay. And so the purpose of tonight is really to bring you all together as a representative group of our community. And these are the things that we're going to be talking about: enrollment, as I mentioned, capacity. What is our educational program now? And what is going to be the educational program that is needed in the future that we may not even be able to conceptually understand or have an idea of what that looks like? The physical conditions of each of our spaces, and then what's the functional adequacy? So we want to define those facility needs as determined by data and program, and prioritize solutions. And that's where your brain power, your collective wisdom is needed and necessary. So we appreciate that. And the outcome, we will have a long-range facility plan garnered from the work that we do here. That'll be grounded in data and educational programming, and will meet the needs of the students and the families in the Wenatchee community based on the feedback that we get from you and the information that we get from you. And this is a summary of why we are here: to develop and agree on core elements of a long-range facility plan driven by the district's educational programming needs and focus on student success, all supported by data. Phil is the data guy. He's got data all over the place, and so it's good. So he's going to be bringing the data, and we're going to incorporate existing facilities needs into the overall planning, prioritize projects defined within the long-range facility plan, and get creative. This is a time for us to be thinking outside of the box, time for us to get creative and talk about some of the concerns and issues that we have in our school district. And some introductions. Phil, who I've referenced over here, Phil Crocker, is going to be helping us through these meetings. You're like the ringmaster for tonight. You're just going to be taking us through it all. It's going to be good. That's right. We like it. We like it. And then we have Rob Gross here, who is also on our team as well. And then David Bodine is not with us, but we also have Jonathan Miller, who is our OSPI liaison. He's the OSPI guru. And then Megan Garrett. Some of you met Megan earlier. She was coming in to have conversations with the community. In fact, I liked what she called it. She says, "I'm going to come in and date your community. I need to get to know them a little bit." So some of you were able to meet Megan, and she's be putting together some marketing and communication pieces for us. But I also have to just share that Diana Haglin is in the house. Raise your hand, Diana. Diana is part of all of this work, and Kim White as well. They were part of the invitation process that got you all here. So we just appreciate them as well. And let's see, are you taking this? Should we let him? Can you guys give a round of applause to Phil Crocker? We appreciate it. Thanks, buddy.
Yes, there's.
All right.
It's not lost on me that he continued to refer to Phil and the dream team, not Phil as part of the dream team, but Phil and so I'm working through that right now. And data is like a clipboard. It gets you into meetings. That's the way I look at that, right? I can get past any safety and security thing in any of your schools with a clipboard, and it's happened in some of your schools. But anyhow, thank you. It's nice to see the folks that did spend time with me out in your schools when I walked through last month. I really appreciated your time. Tonight is a bit of an anomaly, and you have a list of meetings in front of you. And we did put some summer meetings in. Our kind of thought is let's get to June and see where we're at and see where we think we need to go and talk about it as a group. Okay. So no one panic yet or flee because of the summer meetings. We'll talk about it. Well, it's because it's on the last slide. There's always one student. I was a 7th grade teacher. There's always one. It's on the last slide, but thank you. No, perfect. Yeah, it's, we'll get it. It's April 16th and it should have been on there. That's my oversight. Just to give you kind of a sense here, I'm the guy that kind of bridges education, facilities, program. So I'm the, if you think the education side of the conversation, Rob and his team are the construction side of the conversation. They know education very well, but that's where we blend together. And then Megan is the one to help with your community interactions, engagement, kind of, I don't have much bedside manner, so I'm not the guy to do that, but she's great at that. We have a planning process. We've gathered the data. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And oh, I was just going to say tonight is you're going to sit and I'm sorry, I'm going to go as quickly as I can and we will revisit this data and you will get a copy of it. But there's really no other way than to just turn the fire hose on and inundate you because you're going to use that data in all the rest of those meetings. Every other meeting you're going to come to, we're going to work table groups. If they're on Zoom, they'll be in work groups. You won't have to sit through another hour and a half data presentation, I promise. But thank you in advance for tonight. And Diana, have you locked the door? Because, okay. So then this is us, this is our meeting set. We'll get a draft plan. You will create a draft plan. We will help facilitate that. And when that gets ready, then this committee will make a recommendation to the school board about what they think should happen, both in scope, what should happen, and maybe a little bit of when. What size bite should we take? Every community has to decide what size bite they're going to take. In Washington State, primarily the only way to get capital dollars is to go out to your community. Not saying it's right or wrong, it's just how it works. So if we do decide to do something that doesn't fit in the other budgets, that's just, and then you kind of, if you can help say, there's 15 things, let's take a bite of 2 maybe, or whatever, but that work will have come through your work. So any questions about the work at hand or why you're here? Corey went through this. These are the types of data we use. I'll walk through each of these in later slides, so we won't spend any time on them if you're good with that. There's some planning assumptions though, and they're important because we'll end up coming back to them. The district does have a goal that all students should be housed in permanent facilities. Does anybody know what the non-permanent facility in education is? Portable classroom, correct. And they're not really portable, right? Like I want to when's the last time a portable moved? Because they're really expensive to move. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars to move them. So they don't move. But there's a lot of reasons they're not terrific. Sometimes they're the perfect solution. Sometimes they really are, but often they are more emergency. So the goal is that we don't want to necessarily assume from our facility standpoint that that's a good solution. Okay. Secondary teachers will continue to prep in their classrooms. For those of you that school was a long time ago, your teachers always generally had 1 hour a day where they were alone in their room. They could work, they could cry, they could do whatever they needed to do, but it was their time. Often many of them spent time with students. But that is sort of a model. There's another model where teachers move and schools use every single bit of space every day. That's more the collegiate model. If you think if your professor rolls in when you roll in. So this is the assumption though. We're going to continue this. And then as Corey mentioned, the educational spaces need to work for what we're teaching today, as well as what we want to teach tomorrow. And I had some really great conversations with some of the education leaders in the room as I walked through your buildings, talking about what are you trying to deliver? What do kids need to learn that this building built 60 years ago never considered? And that's what we'll talk about a little bit. Questions on the planning assumptions? As a middle school teacher, they teach you to stop and wait. So just holler out if you have something. Educational programming. Don't go through it all, but for those of you, again, that aren't in education, thank you for coming because this needs to be a community effort, not a district effort, because we'll be better, we'll have a better outcome. But this is what when we talk about educational programming, it's not just what the teacher is teaching the kids, it's what the kids are doing, it's how lunch works, it's after school activities, it's interscholastic activities. It is all of that is educational programming. If you look down at the bottom, it's also things that don't even happen on our campuses. When students go to Running Start, they go to another they go to a college early, when they do college in the classroom or from home as a homeschool model, all of that is included. When I started this, I was not the oldest guy in the room, and I'm getting there. But when some of us went to school, it looked like this. If you went to a small rural school like I did, it looked kind of like that. It was just, we call it the egg crate. An egg crate with the gym, and the gym was also the lunchroom, and it was also where everything happened in the community. That was your school. Then in the 70s, we said, you know what? We kind of need to put music. Kids need to learn music, and we need a library. I didn't have a library in my schools until high school. And then, remedial ed, you started to see a little expansion. And now we start feeding the kids through the food program. And we have a stage, and that principal is actually not a teacher anymore. It's an office. So things started to change. And today, current schools, I won't go through all the spaces, there's a lot. There's a lot of special programs. There's a lot of unique spaces needed. And districts work with really good design firms to figure out what are the spaces that we need that our program requires. And then they're built specifically for that. So when we talk about schools, if you're thinking about the old school you went to, this is more like what new schools are like. And you have a couple in your district. So, Washington's a good example, I think, of a thoughtful newer school. Okay, enrollment projections. One thing we do is we do enrollment projections. We have a pretty cool system, and it uses 5 different models. And so these are 5 different algorithms that we have 20 years of data. We run the last 6 and we look forward 6, because after that, you get pretty far off. So we go through the different models, and then we have another algorithm that blends them together with what we know about your size of district. And that gives us pretty close. Statewide, we're between 98 and 99% accurate on next year. So with the district, we were 97 point something for Wenatchee last year. But that's what you're seeing here. So these are your district enrollment projections starting with next year. Then you see we kind of do a lower estimate, a higher estimate, and a best estimate. And I'm working with your district, and we kind of looked back, and the district's kind of noodling using something between the best estimate and the lower estimate. And we're down to like 1% difference there, but they're really doing well to look at, like what does this look like? But one thing you see, if you like tables, is it goes down. But if you're like me, you like charts. So that's your district. And what you see here is this is the last 6 years of enrollment. Then this is the projection. They're pretty much, the top one kind of flattens, but it still starts to go down a little bit. The middle one, green one, is the best one. And as you can see, the further out we get, the less accurate we get. The lines are further apart. So just understand they are projections. But we are confident from our work of doing this that your district will continue to decline in enrollment for the foreseeable future.
Does that include, like, you look at birth rates as well?
That was one of the metrics, correct. Linear natality K. So we do a regression on birth rates, which lag. We just got updated one. So your district will just get data. We upload the data. We update the data 3 times a year. So they'll get updated birth rates, but it won't change. I don't know. I don't. What we have is we have historical data. Now, it could level out a little bit, but in every community in the state, so statewide, for example, the drop's been about 4% after COVID. 4% of the students nobody knows where they went. The rest moved around. So we know where they went because we have every district in the state. So I'm not familiar with that. I'm happy to look at it if someone can get me it. We didn't do that study. So I'm happy to look at it and bring you an answer to the next meeting or thinking about it. That's helpful. Yes.
What's their chart like? I personally call them to ask about what is in my kid and they're full. And so
Correct.
I'm wondering like what's going on here that is that same thing happening in those other schools?
Other school districts around you aren't necessarily declining at the same rate. Some are, some aren't. We can bring district. I don't know off the top of my head. I can bring you the Mhm.
needs for support.
Well, somewhat. It depends. If the students are leaving here and going there, it's one thing. But if those communities have different housing metrics or something like that. I hear the implication. Yeah, no, so that's what we need to peel apart a little bit over the course of our meetings, is a little bit of the why. Every community starts to wonder about whether they're growing or declining, but more often when they're declining, they start to wonder about it. So we'll start to pull some of that apart. So I can bring districts around you and we can take a look at it. And then if there is something that looks like a thread we should pull, we can do that. And we work with a lot of districts, so we can get a sense real quick of what's happening in those districts. Good questions. Thank you. Other? This is your kindergarten through 5 enrollment projections. Really similar to the district as a whole. One thing, and I'll just go through these and show you. Here's your 6-8. Again, a little bit different because you have different ages of groups going through, but not substantially different. And your 9-12. Again, a little bit different of angles, but the same kind of thing. What we look for is some districts is what we see is a large influx at middle school. Kids are going to elementary somewhere else and coming back, or a large influx of high school, or the reverse. They'll go to elementary in the district, but they'll go somewhere else for middle or high school. We're not necessarily seeing that here, but it would be worth, but what we don't know is if they never start. That would be a question. There are standards, programmatic class standards, that we use when we calculate the capacity of your buildings. So when an architect builds a building, they figure out how many kids and adults can fit in the building, but they do it on a spreadsheet. They have no idea of the educational program being delivered or what the rooms will be used for. So what we do is we define the educational program needs, and then we can go through each building and we actually count how many kids programmatically can fit in that building to define a programmatic capacity. Does that kind of make sense? So it's a more accurate model. So what we have to know is, from a district perspective, what is the perfect size for your class? It's not the contracted size. It's just the educational size we'd like to have. So you can see here, and the top one's only highlighted because I forgot to unhighlight it, but we verified that. Just for clarification, TK is 30 kids all day. Pre-K is 15 kids AM, 15 kids PM. So from our perspective, we look at that classroom and we'll see the same amount. So here it is for middle school. You'll see that if you look the lower classes have fewer kids in them, and then it kind of rolls up to about 26. And then here you have 27. Of note is a couple things. You'll notice that music, PE, library, and art don't have any student numbers. Does anybody know why? Correct. We've already counted for them in the other classes. So what happens is this is where elementary teachers get their preparatory time. Kids go to music, or kids go to library, or kids go to art, or kids go to PE. So we've already counted for those kids. So they don't get counted as self-contained special education are those classrooms where kids spend more of their day in than not. So we keep those about 9. And then your pull-out classrooms or your resource rooms or your Title I rooms are similar. Those kids have already been accounted for somewhere else. At the middle school and high school levels, you'll see similar zeros, but you don't see the library. The teachers prep in their classrooms. There's not a course they go to for prepping. And the high school would be really similar. So those are you never need to know that again. You just need to know where it came from. So here's an example of John Newberry Elementary and how that all rolls together. So we go through the building and we count the number of rooms. And then we layer that room capacity that we talked about on there. And then we total it up, and you come up with a number that is 473 kids. But the world is not perfect like that, as any principal will tell you. So what we do is don't laugh at me that it took us almost 20 years to figure this out, but by putting what I've dubbed the imperfect fit factor, IF squared, 95%. That gets it so close because you get more kids in one class, a little bit less in another, you get a split grade, it works out better. So really, the permanent programmatic capacity of John Newberry Elementary is 449 kids. Does that kind of make sense? Because that's okay. And you'll notice the note, we are not including portable classrooms. So when I do little things like this, it means there's actually 4 classes that aren't in the main building that are in portables. but I've done some horse swapping. So you actually do have 3 resource rooms and an enrichment room. And they may or may not be in the portables, but I've made sure that you had enough room in the building for your core program. So that's just how we account for portable classrooms when they're there, but we don't count them in the count. All your elementaries, it's the same calculation. I've only grayed out TK and pre-K because they don't track with the numbers we get on the head count numbers. So don't worry about that. It's just there. We can always come back to people if anybody, but I didn't want to not have them there. So you can see about 2,800 kids is what we have programmatic capacity for across all of our elementaries after we remove all the portable classrooms. I see some head nodding. Okay. So if we take your enrollment projections for elementary, the blue line, and we take that capacity we just calculated, that's what it looks like. So about 26, 27 is when, even if we never used a single portable classroom, we would actually have empty space in our buildings, district-wide, elementary level. We can do the same thing with middle schools. A little bit different. Middle schools get a scheduling factor because they have period days. So what 83% represents is 5 out of 6 periods. Corey spoke about they're all moving to a 6-period day next year, so we use that in our calculations. So we counted up all the rooms, used the room capacity, got the total, applied our scheduling factor, because remember, teachers are in those classrooms 1 period a day without kids. So each classroom only gets used 83% of the time. Apply our imperfect fit factor, 1,739 for 6, 7, and 8. And again, you'll have access to these. We'll make a PDF of all this for you. So that's what that looks like. Again, the axes are a little bit different, but you can see that we're really not in danger district-wide of utilizing all of our middle school space. Good for you to know. High school, Westside High School runs differently than Wenatchee High School. So I just gave you an example of Wenatchee, but we did calculate the totals for both. But it would look like a math class to show you that. So Wenatchee High School, for example, then do the same thing. You notice they have an 86% scheduling factor, 7-period day. Each classroom is used 6 of 7 periods a day in that calculation. Imperfect fit factor. If you wonder that middle school where Corey spoke about changing to a 6-period day reduced some teachers, it's because one of your middle schools, it's a very nice program. It's great, but it's about a 75% utilization rate. So at any given time in the day, about a quarter of the entire school isn't being used. So that's why if you up that to 83 or 86%, you can get more of the school used with the same number of teachers. Okay. This is our high school graph. That does include Westside High, which is a few hundred kids. But as you can see, we're above capacity because, and we'll show you that, there are a number of portables at Wenatchee High School. So again, we're not counting those as space, but the kids are still there. 2 things happen here though. The reason you're not just busting at the gills is you have portables, and at the high school level, you have a good number of students who do running start or they might go to the skills center for part of the day. So they're not necessarily all in the building at the same time, but we need to account for them in case they were, right? So that's why. But if you look out by 2930, again, if we took away all the portables, no kid ever went to any program outside the district, you'd be pretty close. It might, we did not calculate your running start kids because we assume a seat for them because we don't know if they're gone one hour or 6 hours or 5 hours. So no, but that wouldn't impact the calculation. It's a good question. If you were a growing district and trying to figure out space, that's a critical question, but I don't think I don't think that's a problem on our table. So if you look here, now your utilization is enrollment divided by capacity. So you can get a utilization calculation. So if you look at Washington Elementary, for example, has a permanent capacity of 497. This year's enrollment was 470. I took a snapshot with the principal, so if it's slightly off, that's okay. which means 27, so 95%. We're using 95% of the capacity of that building. So if you go down, you're looking kind of in the 90s. You have 85 at Lincoln. There's some space there for sure. 97 Mission View. And then Sunny Slope is 102 because that's a little tight and they have some portables. So that gives you a sense. District-wide, you're at 94% utilization. And again, your strategic use of some portables that you have on the campuses keeps it from being kids crammed in a classroom, bumping elbows. It's working. If you were growing, we would, anything in red, we would say we probably want to start addressing that. But since we think that those numbers are probably going to go down, though likely in a few years, you might not have any red. You'd just be in the 90s, which would be good use of your facilities. Once you get below 90%, you start to have questions about the use of the facilities. 90 to 95 is sort of the perfect range for a school building from just a use standpoint. You can see that the projected utilization for 2930 for elementary is 89%. So we'll be below 90% in the projected future. Here it is. So I've carried the elementary total at the top just for you. You will use a table like this in your work in the next few meetings, which is why I'm spending a little time on it. But you can see the middle school. We talked about Foothills a little bit. It is the most full of yours, but it works. But then the other two, there's just ample room at the other two. And again, as a middle school teacher, there's never enough room. You give me 15 kids in a room and they fill it up in 7th grade. But you do calculated. What you see at Wenatchee High School is 104%. You're legitimately over capacity there. Westside High School, again, calculated a little bit differently, but even calculating much smaller class sizes, at Westside, we did decide, the district did decide to have us count portables as permanent housing because it's a good location for them now, and it likely isn't going to change in the near future. So they're at 85%. And again, not all those kids are there all day. And they run an evening program too. So then we have a couple unique schools, the Castle Rock Early Learning Center. You've got some room there for some additional growth. And then your Valley Academy K-8. So that's a unique program because kids come for some or all of the day, and it can change at any given time. So the school's kind of full a lot, but it's not all the same kids all throughout the day. And there's a pretty substantial waiting list, as I understand. So, and they are currently, so we tried to do some calculations on it. They're roughly at about 115%. They're pretty packed in there. And then some district totals, which are, again, just another data point. It's not as helpful as these individuals, but you can see dropping. We're currently using about 90% of all of our facilities. The middle school is the one pulling that down. And then we'll be at about 87 in the future. Yes. So Pinnacles. So what it does is if they continue to grow at the rate they have been growing, it is calculated because it's been picking up that impact every year. I know that they want to add high school. So if they grab 200 kids, it would be a blip for a year or two until the calculation caught up with it. So that's one and that's a good thing that we can peel apart. We can talk to Pinnacles. We can figure out what their numbers are looking like. Yeah, absolutely.
The whole picture of our budget status. And I'm curious and I know this is going to be, I'm just gonna rip it up. If I'm looking at this utilization and enrollment capacity, and I'm looking at the current utilization, and I understand that this is taken into consideration, of course, and it's permanent fees with the calculation. I'm seeing Lincoln Elementary at 85% current utilization, and I'm seeing Columbia Elementary at 91% utilization. I see a headline coming on why are we proposing Columbia Elementary closure as budget savings over Lincoln Elementary when it's not being utilized. I'm just trying to
Sure. And I'm not gonna be able to answer that, but I will tell you that it's a multifaceted question is the answer. There's 50% more students at Lincoln than there are at Columbia, so they're not interchangeable necessarily. There's, as I learned, you know, I went to all your schools, they're in different geographic regions of the city. So that's an important consideration. And so the utilization is helpful in large context, but they're not apples to apples schools. Some schools can run at 98% utilization comfortably, and others would be busting at the seams because of the types of classrooms. So it's just one data point, which is why we're bringing you different views of the schools. It's a good question.
That there are footnotes included and highlighted, because I absolutely see this becoming a wildfire term.
Well, we have another version of this. So let's get to the next, no, I'm with you. And maybe we'll, you know, not include this one anymore. Thank you. No. Well, we got to talk about that stuff. That's important to talk about. Yeah, Corey.
Someone could direct it, someone takes a snapshot of that. Yeah. But based on how you calculated permit capacity, it's based on what are the things that are there.
Correct.
And that's not,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, when I look at that chart.
Yeah.
It's very
No, and it's a good question. You also have I mean, if you think about all the different factors that go into why a student goes away to school, there's also assignments. And so we redid all of Spokane's assignments, for example, because they put in new middle schools. And, you know, thankfully we only impacted about 5% of the middle school kids, but we had to account for every kid in the district. And you start getting at that. Okay, they're there, but is that the right school for that group, or can we swap? And so it just, yeah, but that alone would not be a good chart. I won't disagree with that. So this is a piece of the chart you'll use, but I want you to know it's there. You'll have access to it. This would not be a public facing thing because it doesn't make any sense without some context. So that was one: enrollment, capacity, and utilization. I know you're just like, this is the best night ever, right? Like if we can talk about insurance, you'll be even happier. But if I try to sell you something, so it's going to get better though. That was the slow part. Okay. So then we're going to look at physical condition of the buildings, because you need to know, like, what's the physical condition of these buildings too. There's two parts to that. There's the study and survey that Corey referenced, that engineers came through and looked at all of your kind of engineering style systems. They never let me get close to that stuff. Then there's also a team came through and did a clean energy audit report that is required of all buildings in the state, including school buildings. And it gives you a sense specifically of energy use pieces. Think of your HVAC, pieces like that. Each school, they're going to come to our next meeting and give you much more detail. But I asked them to kind of give me an initial prioritization from their findings. And this is what they said. Wenatchee High School, like they would take this entire meeting and want to talk to you about it tonight. It's a top priority in that space. The middle schools kind of ended up in the second space, which is interesting because they're not of the same age. And then the elementaries and the others kind of were like in that priority work. So we're going to carry that forward for you as a number right now for each school, and we can review those. But there's so many metrics that go into that we wanted to make it kind of straightforward from a prioritization. Yeah.
So like,
Oh boy, that is a test I cannot pass right now. Rob, do you have? Thank you. Somebody bail me out. Yeah, it's a big one. And actually, and that is part of the priority. It's a great question. What was the square footage? They are of different sizes, obviously, your elementaries too. But one of the criteria is that, as you know, this, it sounds like the larger the building, the more immediate you have to address it or start paying a penalty to the state, a financial penalty. Yes. Lincoln is not on this list. Lincoln is not on this list because I did not put it on there. Thank you. We'll add it. It would be a 3. All the elementaries were in a 3. Thank you. Did it win? Yes, they pass. So on the physical condition, it uses a different, this is a statewide matrix that gets used, and the folks that do it all have to be approved, and they do it around the state. So you can kind of see how the scoring works. Fair is a pretty big range, and it's not uncommon for school buildings to be fair. I'll just tell you that. That's not necessarily alarm, though a 62 definitely is different than an 84 on a fair. You get into poor and you're down so low that becomes kind of a really big red flag for a community. Like that building probably doesn't have 20 more years in it. And by the way, Rob, if we were going to build a new building today, 4 years out, 5 years out, 2.5 years out, if you had the money today and they could get work in today, it's 2 to 3 years. So if you take 2 or 3 years to get it, it's the 4 to 5 year model. So districts that need a building today are 3 to 5 years away at that moment. So that's why a plan is really helpful. So that's what, just to give you some context. So here's the physical condition. And you see, I put the clean energy audit score to the side because those kind of go together. So I've tried to highlight Lewis and Clark came up poor. That should be a red flag for us. Mission View came up poor. The fairs, again, Columbia let the lower end of fair. Valley Academy, you know, they didn't. So this is a good example. They did the physical condition. Has anybody ever been to Valley Academy? Does anybody hear from there? So they did the physical condition of it. They didn't ask how well it worked as a school. There's a different score for that. So that's a good example. And we didn't find any, by the way, we didn't find anything drastic on that, but I'll touch on that in a second. Here, how am I doing? Good. Middle schools, Pioneer, the gym. So they rate the buildings differently. So they'll take the gym separate from the main because they're separate buildings. So the gym is in poor condition. And then Wenatchee High School had the lowest rating in your entire district and it's below 50. I don't know. I've done hundreds of districts, worked with hundreds. I don't see many scores that low, quite honestly, from a physical condition. It is amazing walking through that school. If I had known that score, I would have not believed it. You guys do an amazing job in this district of keeping your facilities operating and running. I imagine there's a lot behind the curtain I didn't see from a physical standpoint that's struggling, but that is it's an important metric. You'll also see that on that clean energy audit, it came out as a top priority. So then my part, yes. Yeah. Sorry, the question is there's a timeline. That was on the clean energy audit, and we'll have the gentleman from McDonald Miller here at the next meeting to go through it in detail. But if I can summarize, and Rob, if I get this wrong, help. Basically, the state has this law is going into effect and it's rolling in by size of building. So that's why your high school is automatically prioritized above from a deadline because it's larger. So the larger the building you get going. And there's also some grant money coming that's going to be available and you want to be in the front of the line to get that grant money. So that's part of what went into McDonald Miller's recommendation of a 1 there. To them, Wenatchee High School is a no-brainer to try to get some of that and try to start to address it. But since it's also in poor condition, do you just replace the HVAC and let the rest of the building? I mean, that's what you need to struggle with on this a little bit. Yeah.
So, I looked at Valley Academy, I don't have like they're fair. I looked through the numbers and worked through kind of their much lower capacity than Foothills. If we have this drastic decline in enrollment, are we looking, and I think one of the school board meetings, I listen to every school board meeting, I think I heard the number 43 and classrooms in the elementary schools. And so are we looking at, and this might be less you more him, Valley Academy, are we looking to moving them to Orchard and closing that facility because they are at, they're at fair? Are we looking at down the road? I'm asking this because I can't wait for 6 meetings in, I guess, some of these things. Are we going to be looking to close Orchard because it's so small that then we need to just consolidate? I'm just trying to figure out if some of these buildings that need improvements, are we actually just going to need to consolidate more?
And I'm only going to repeat the question for folks on Zoom, and I'm not going to do you justice on it at all. But is anyone going to look at consolidation and reuse of buildings yes. I think, again, part of the question to this committee is, what's the best use of the facilities that we have moving forward? So I think your answer is in this room, in a sense, from a recommendation, if that bubbles up through your work. And I'm not just punting that. That's legit. I think that's the question we need to struggle with is these are the facilities we have. Here's our projections. And what we can do between meetings is bring you new calculations or new what if models to see how they fit. So that is the work. Yeah. And we generally go in with no presuppositions because we don't know your community as well as you do. And okay. Functional adequacy. So that was physical condition. Remember, we also had enrollment capacity and utilization. Now we have functional adequacy, another dimension of each school. This does ask the question, how well does this school operate for what we're trying to use it for? Which is really important. My perfect example I love is NGSS is a set of science standards that came out now years ago. But in the old days, sixth graders tended to do science out of a book. Tended. NGSS says that needs to be a lab science. It's really tough to do a lab science at a desk that's angled, right? So you don't have a science room, you don't have a table, you don't have any wet areas and a lot of these things. That's not a good space for that program. Other examples would be if you have a kindergarten classroom in what was built as a fifth grade classroom. They can't reach the sink, the toilet's too high, there's no toilet in the classroom, it's too small, things like that. That's what we look for as we go through. Are these the right spaces given best practices or district practices for the program? Different scoring metric, by the way, because I don't know, we always have. So as we go through, it's always nice when the newer buildings score well. That's always makes me feel good. When they don't, we have conversations. But you can see the issues came at Mission View Elementary and then Valley Academy. And I would say Valley Academy was our greatest example of, boy, doing great work, getting kids under a roof, getting instruction happening, making a program valid, but really not the right spaces. I mean, just full stop. So that was the biggest challenge there. Again, the fares are okay. And some of these fares are because it's because maybe the building has chosen to put fifth graders in a couple portables and use those fifth grade classrooms for something else, but they wouldn't necessarily have to. They could move those kids into the building if they wanted. Remember, we talked about the use of portables. It's a bit more strategic than necessitated by capacity at the elementary level, but we still would say, I'll show you another example. At Westside High School, there's a CTE classroom and a portable. Okay, we said portables were okay for them. Yeah, we did, except that it's a carpeted portable trying to run an engineering class with sawdust and it doesn't have enough power. So you get the thing, it's not the right space. Now, is it better than no space? Absolutely. Can we run a program? They're doing just yeoman's work out there, but it's not the right space. Science would be the same thing. Art would be the same thing. So that's what a functional adequacy score is. So now we start to bring it together, which I hope is a little bit better because it gives more context to the same chart. Permanent capacity, current utilization, physical condition score, your clean energy audit, and your functional adequacy score for each building. So this is the chart, the table that you will be using as you kind of think through, are there schools we should focus on? Are there needs, and how do we start to get at some of those needs? There's your elementaries. And there's a very big table of your middles, your highs, and your others. And again, we will carry every week, we will bring a couple of these forward for you so they keep being in front of you. So don't worry about that. And we will, because it's a lot, I know. But Foothills, did I? Oh, had Pioneer. I'm sorry about that. The Jim Mang, got it. Thank you. No, Rob, could you make a note of that? Because I'm not going to remember that. Thank you. I'll take a look at that. And we need to add Lincoln to the clean energy audit. So where that information came from now, does that make sense? Or you have some sense of what's behind it all? And this gives you at least 3 dimensions to look at every building before we get to some of the other subjective pieces. Okay. So what we did is after we went through all that with our team, we just thought we'd give you some of our initial findings. They are not recommendations, they're just findings. First ones we've talked about, We've lost about a elementary school's worth of kids over the last 6 years. You did, except for the one pop-up right after COVID. And for those of you in the business, you know that elementary kids often didn't come to school that year. And so when they came back, it popped. But while many districts are back above where they were, some districts are still getting close. You came up, and as Corey showed, continued your decline. And then our projections do indicate that it'll continue to decline. And again, we shouldn't feel bad about that. A district is either growing, declining, or staying the same. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And we'll try to peel some apart for you, but it's not a reflection on your community by any stretch. It is the geographic sway that happens around the state. 100%. But we need to address it. That's okay. Yeah. But we need to address it nonetheless. We need to have a plan for it. For your middle school and high school, it has dropped every year the last 5 years. You're 210 kids lower at the middle school and about 202 lower. And what you're seeing there is just, you're seeing these elementary declines roll up into the grade levels. What this showed us was I kind of pointed out earlier. We're not seeing anything glaring that like this grade range has a real unique challenge or enrollment trend. They're pretty consistent. And again, we're pretty conservative on our projections as far as, we'll tell you if we think the system isn't seeing it right, but we do think that you're going to continue to, it might slow down a little bit, but I would not plan for growth in the near future. On the capacity utilizations we talked about, elementary utilization is above current capacity today. Your use of portables is mitigating that, but you will drop below your capacity line in the next 2 years without using any portables. Remember, that was that crossing piece. Middle school will stay below capacity. The high school is above capacity and is only being addressed through the use of portables. So even with the running start kids, you would still have capacity challenges at the high school. It's working right now, but but again, if you continue to decline enrollment, it should get a little bit easier and a little bit easier. So and those portables, those are actually some wet portables out there, which means that you can actually run science classrooms. So they're not necessarily a terrible space. What's rough about it is just the safety and security side of it, and the fencing and the amount of time it takes kids to traverse to those from the main building. And then again, West Side High is below capacity because we're counting the portables. It's a beautiful, I've done a nice job on the main building, and then the rest is sort of a portable campus. Probably not all the right spaces. We talked about Castle Rock already, and then Valley Academy. And, if we need, we could maybe, Corey, have someone talk about Valley Academy from the district at another meeting. But I think that's a unique one where it looks like capacity is a little tougher to calculate, but it does look like they're over capacity, and it does look like they have a waiting list. So we as a committee might want to know more information about that. Physical condition. This is just a description of what you already saw. Same for here. Nothing really getting called out specifically, except, we did want to list it out as an archival document. Functional adequacy, same. I think the table is a much easier piece to use than trying to read it on a slide, but we do want to have it written down and documented. And again, Valley Academy scored poor largely because it's a converted space. It wasn't built as a school. Done great work to get what they can get out of it. Okay, that was we're doing good. We're doing really good. Questions? Yes.
But why does Mission View set aside the functional matters? Why is it
I can't recall off the top of my head. I think Mission View Sunny Slope has the portables. I would have to, I'll have to bring you that answer next meeting. Yeah, it wasn't glaring. It might be their use of portables and they just don't have enough to swap out. I don't recall. Because they're so similar, it doesn't stand out to me. But what I'm going to bring you all, if you're interested, as a piece of data is every time we call out anything that lowers the score of a school, it gets a write-up. And so I can bring you a list from every school of the things that were called out, and you can get a sense of, oh, it's the port because of the portables. Well, we're not worried about that, or we are. Or no, wow, the classrooms are undersized, especially for the kindergartners. There's not the right size classrooms. That would be a different thing. So I could bring that for you. I know it's a great. Yeah, we don't give portables a good rating, even if they have bathrooms, but it makes me feel a little bit better for the kids. But yeah, not with you though. It's
If I go left, I might, that's gnarly. I might get forever.
It is part of the actual original building. So there is some maintenance that is being used for that. So like the portables can only be used in fifth grade classrooms. So everyone else is inside of the building. So that one call that Tucker talked about, that's like Narnia.
yeah.
Groups that do collaborate, with the pods, similar to what Boston has, and also
That's not also where the girls have to walk through the boys' bathroom. Okay, yeah, there you go. That's my mission view. Girls have to walk through the boys' bathroom to get to their bathroom because of the artificial wall. Oh, I'm going now. And the high cap space is an alcove, not a classroom. Correct. It is the build out to try to get spaces. So we look at that and say that's not a legit space. So that's why. Yeah. Yeah. Good question. Thank you. Thanks for bailing me out. I should have brought Jolly Ranchers. Functional adequacy or the physical condition? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know what level they do. They don't do an earthquake analysis on it. There is some level, I believe. We could pull, it's a statewide form, so we can pull all the elements. In fact, we'll share the study and survey with you. It's got a lot of data. That means very little to me, but you can take a look at it for sure. Yeah. No, but we can make it available to you. Yeah, we're not going to make handouts for everyone because it's like 150 pages long. So, yeah, great. No. The whole goal is to get all this information in front of you and then help you start working through it in groups. And then stuff will start bubbling up and we can go back and refine it and work some more for you. It really is an iterative process. And there really is no clear answer or pathway that we're waiting for you to have an aha moment about. We're just hoping that you do. So, other questions? Yes. Yeah. Correct. And we could run a capacity calculation for, there's a sense I got from the principals that there's a sense of how the students will be divvied up. And we could rerun those capacity calculations if helpful. Would you guys like this? Okay. Do you want to wait to see how I guess let's not bring it to next month because we already have some more physical information for you next month, but that would put us at May for the next meeting and I'll make a note of that. But yeah, we can make that adjustment. Yes.
The data doesn't make sense in my mind. Why would it's closed down that has physical function higher?
And I can't answer. I don't know. There's more elements from this. We wanted you to have this data, and this isn't necessarily driving about a school closure. Yeah, I think that's a different conversation to have people who made the decisions around that. What we wanted to show you was the data around it, and then we can recalculate the data if a closure happens and give you a sense of what it will look like with the new data, for sure. Yes. Perfect. Okay. I will do it ahead of time so we don't, it's not a crazy morning. No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that because you saved me from a frantic morning of the 15th. Now we can calculate. Yes, ma'am.
Why are we focusing so much on finding students instead of focusing on how we have so that we are not putting ourselves in a worse better position? It seems to be there is I moved here from a
Yeah.
very successful district with kids. And I would propose there's wonderful things going on that parents would love to help get better, but there's very little transparency, decisions being made that I'm sure if it went, I just feel like this is so negative, and we're focusing on losing all these students instead of looking at what can we do to keep them.
So I hear you 100%. And I think that that's a good conversation. I don't know that it's a facility related conversation. The district has many things happening at the same time. Every district does. One is staffing, one is school operations, one is planning for facilities that is like a decade long process of replacing them. And I don't know that getting at that fits in this committee, but I'm not saying it's not a good question. I just don't think this is the right group for that question. I hear you. What we have to do is deal with the actual data. And the data is, it's been declining, for 9 years. That is our data set today. And if it changes in the future, we have systems in place to catch that and start saying, hey, wait a minute, things are moving. Seattle's a good example. Seattle sold off a ton of buildings in the 70s. And then people moved back into the district in the 90s and had kids. And they had no school buildings. And it put them in a real bad bind because they did fire sales, sold off huge high schools, the whole deal. So I think it does touch facilities at that point, but I don't think we're in that part of that conversation. I think we're trying to figure out what do we do as fiduciaries in our community with community dollars to best use the facilities we have, given the data that we have. I don't want to discount your question, but I think that's what our goal here is. But we don't necessarily need to build it. I mean, that's the thing too. Sure. Sure. Sure.
That started and hasn't been.
Sure. So I would say, again, if we use the data and the program and we let that lead us to a place and we end up with a plan that says we need X and X is in tension with other elements, I think that's a good time to deal with that. But to anticipate that tension ahead of time, I think devalues our use of the data. I think we let the data take us and tell us what we need to do. And let's build a plan for that. Because in your personal families, you would do the same thing. You would build a plan regardless of what was happening. So you would have a plan to respond to.
I want to know what causes this situation, and I would take a step back and say, okay, I'm seeing a challenge here. How am I going to redirect that?
Sure.
Challenge? And I don't think that we have seen that slide in some of my personal.
Okay. So again, your data shows that you've been declining for 9 years. Full stop. I'm not saying you can't, that it's impossible to change the course of that. I'm not even telling you exactly why you've been declining. We're trying to help on that a little bit. But I think to not plan would put you in a worse spot in 2 years than having a plan. And if you want to, the nice thing is about the plan, by the way, we call it a roadmap. You change it. If things change, you now have a plan from which to adjust to, and you're not starting at blank. So I think those are great conversations. I think there's probably different work groups or different parts of the district to be having those conversations. And if they influence this, that's helpful. But I don't think they should drive this because I think we should be driven by data and program, or else we're going to kind of be doing what we, be more subjective. Yes.
My question is related to potential. And then we're gonna go back to those times we'll kind of find another school, and then we're gonna ask them to vote yes on the potential increase of property taxes. So I'm just run that by me. I want to make sure I understand that in my head. And with that, are there any non-traditional ways to potentially funding a long-term plan with partners like Microsoft or others, just to mention a few? But as a community member and a potential, making a potential recommendation for the board after a potential closure of school, how do I go public and say, support this levy when we just close your school and you have to go to a different one, or maybe you lost your job
Sure.
or whatnot. So I just want to understand, we talk about transparency here, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good
So
question.
empower me with knowledge.
Yep.
To go out and then tell my constituents, this is what drove that decision, this is how I'm different.
Correct. So, and I don't have a perfect answer, but I'll give you what my off the cuff answer, since I just heard the question. In every school district, some community members are impact. Not everything is always a positive impact. Schools grow and things get overcrowded. Kids go move to portables. Kids can't go to the schools they need to go to because of assignment, and schools close. So that is sort of the part of the life cycle of the public school district. So that's not to diminish how those parents feel, but to say that's not necessarily an irregular occurrence, if that helps. The second piece is that you may, as a committee, decide that there's no need to go out to your community. There is not a first bite to have in the near future. There's no assumption that that is where this committee will land. So I think if we get to the place where this committee says, we need to go out to the community and ask for some dollars, I think that's an excellent time to be evaluating what is the feel in the community, what's happened up to that point, like how do we do that? But I wouldn't want to start planning that piece until we know we are going to actually do that. Is that, because we may come up with a recommendation that doesn't involve going out for a ballot initiative.
Data. Because it shows that we have facilities that are aging, they're forcing the things like that way. So, and it's, please don't take anything as personal. I'm just, you know.
Yeah, no, it's a good.
Data.
Yeah.
We're gonna.
Yeah.
Want to help out.
Yep.
Right? But we also represent the people that.
Yep.
Are neighbors and coworkers. So when we go back to the community and tell them, hey, this is the recommendation we made after we potentially close the school.
Yep.
We want to make sure we have all the dots in the row.
Yep. And I agree with that 100%. And I just am trying to move a little more linearly so that whatever decisions we make are grounded in data and program. And if those decisions then come to a point that you're describing, I think we need to address it then. I just don't know that we should worry about that quite yet. But not to discount it, just to say, I think from a timing perspective, we might be a few months away from that conversation. So can we put it in the parking lot and come to it? Okay, thank you. And I do. Can I just ask one question real quick though? We want to focus on facilities and I don't have the answers for school closure. So perfect. I just wanted to get that because we have one more thing to do tonight and I want to give everyone time. So we just need a couple minutes. Yes.
I took time today, and it's great.
Yeah.
And you're saying, oh, this is what we're gonna talk about down the road. So how many people in this room that was me? Okay, not very many of us. I thought there'd be more. I thought everybody was gonna be Megan, but, so I'm confused because the whole purpose of my meeting with Megan was to talk about if this is so I thought this was more what this meeting was, to hear what other people had to say. So my whole purpose of meeting with Megan was to talk about the concerns that I have, if this is actually going to be a good thing to go to ballot. So then I'm hearing you say, oh, no, we're more linear. This is something we talk about way down the line, but that was actually not my first invitation. It was my first invitation. And I don't know if other people have that experience, but she told me that I was like, I mean, maybe I'm a little bit so she's like, no, every single person, and I was the last person to meet with her, she said, every single person that I have met with has said the same things that you're saying. So for me, I'm like, let's see what data that, if you want to talk about linear, let's look at the data that Megan collected and that we were paying to have her do that up front, because that was, for me, that's like what makes the most sense.
There was a lot there.
Okay, let's look at the Megan data. How about that?
Yeah, so there's no Megan data yet because that collection isn't complete, but that was an excellent segue because we're going to collect some information from you tonight on that. So thank you for that segue. We have it, Rob, if you could pass that out, because I do want to give you time to do it. We are not asking about the vote tonight because we don't know what in the world we would even be voting on yet because we haven't defined anything yet, right? To your question, like, I think that's a really good question to ask ourselves before we go out to the community when we get to a point we know what we're asking for, if anything. Today, what we want to know is there's a few questions on this survey that you're getting. And there's only 5. And what we would like you to do, part of it gets at a little bit of the sentiment that has been shared to give the district a bit of data about what you think the district could be doing better or where the district is excelling. There is one question, number 5 at the end, that says, if this committee ends up recommending a facilities related ballot measure, what, if any, obstacles do you feel the school district may encounter to funding that? So if you have some early ideas, if you have some early concerns, that'd be a fantastic place to put that. We will bring this data back to you anonymously, by the way. This is all anonymous. We'll bring it back to you next meeting as another data point for you to consider as you look at what we might want to recommend to the school board for addressing some of our challenges. Yeah, thanks. And I think, Diana, there's a place to put those. She's gonna. Perfect. Just slip it in there. Perfect. Please don't put a name on it, and we won't, we're collecting it anonymously. We will summarize it up. We'll share it back with you in the next meeting. And then I will also check with Megan and see what the data collection beyond this committee is, where they're at with that. And we'll bring you those data elements if they're ready, or if not, at the following meeting for sure. And that's it. So thank you for your time. It should only take about 5 minutes, but you have 15 if you need it. And if you're done, you can go. So thanks for coming, and we'll see everybody on April 16th at the next meeting.
The handout that you were given as the upcoming dates